Hi everybody, welcome to Scuba Diving Magazine. A dSMB is an integral piece of kit for the modern diver, and it's required by some dive operations around the world. So if you turn up and you don't have one, you're gonna need to rent one. But as ever with scuba diving equipment, there are 1,000 different buoys out there, so how do you choose? So in this guide, I'm gonna focus more on dSMBs for scuba diving, but I will touch on permanent buoys as well, and I'll break down each part to look for, which styles are best for what. So if you're looking to invest in your own surface marker buoy, here are some useful tips and things to look for. You'll often see SMB and dSMB in listings. SMB just stands for surface marker buoy, and it usually just means a buoy that floats on the surface. They're buoyant, go figure, that's why we call them surface marker buoys. A dSMB is a delayed surface marker buoy, one that a scuba diver takes down with them when it's deflated, usually in a pocket or clipped to a D-ring, and then inflates it at the end of the dive to send up to the surface, and it just lets boats know where they are in the water and to hopefully stay away or come pick you up. The other style are more permanent. You inflate them at the beginning of the dive and then you tow them behind you for the entire dive as a permanent marker buoy. They're required in some areas and free divers prefer them as well. The problem comes is that divers call both styles SMBs. They don't always use the dSMB, especially on online listings. The useful part comes in that it's really easy to recognize the different types by their basic shape when they're inflated. dSMBs are long, thin sausage shapes, whereas permanent SMBs tend to be round or chunky torpedo shapes with flags coming out of the top. Most scuba divers carry at least one dSMB because they're the most practical for scuba divers. Permanent buoys tend to be preferred by free divers and snorkelers, and just anywhere, any location that requires permanent buoys for the entire dive. Looking at dSMBs, the biggest design variation is right down at the bottom, and there are three designs. You get open-ended, fluted, and closed. Open-ended are the cheapest, and they're basically just a long plastic sock with one open end. You inflate it by blowing air up inside the bottom with a second stage, or like the exhaust valve of your primary. The downside to these are that if the buoy flops down when it's on the surface, all of that air can just rush out of the bottom and the whole buoy just deflates. Fluted designs are a bit more elegant. They help to prevent this with a narrowing neck at the bottom that actually closes itself when the buoy is full. But of course, you need to be sure that it will be full by the time that it reaches the surface so it doesn't suffer the same problem. Closed cell dSMBs have two one-way valves that ensure that any air that you do put inside is going to stay inside. And to stop it from literally exploding, they have an emergency exhaust valve. The only downside to these is that you can't use a second stage to either inflate it using your exhausted or just using an actual second stage. Permanent SMBs are inflated before the dive with a traditional oral inflation valve that you get on like beach balls and stuff, and they often have a small section on the very bottom to fill with water separate from the air pocket to help the buoy stay upright in the water. That, or it has some kind of weighted section so the heavy point is at the lowest point. I've mentioned inflating your buoy in the previous section. There are a range of ways to inflate and deflate the buoy underwater. The most basic is using your primary second stage or your octo. Just underneath the buoy, push the purge button and the air flows inside of the buoy. This can run the risk of a free flow, especially in cold waters, and it can shift your buoyancy because if you're holding on to it, it's just like inflating your BCD if you keep hold of the buoy, and it works, but it's pretty quick as well. And you also have a second stage either out of your mouth or kind of deployed. Now divers tend to prefer exhaling into the buoy, either through the exhaust valve out of the bottom of your second stage, into the bottom of the buoy, or by blowing into the one-way valve that's built into the SMB. That way your buoyancy doesn't change because you're taking the air volume from your lungs and putting that into the buoy, so it gives you a chance until you next take a breath. You'll see a lot of buoys have this little tube that holds the one-way valve, and it has a spring-loaded section with the same fitting as most BCDs, so you can disconnect your BCD hose, pop it on there, and then when you push it in, it actually inflates the dSMB very, very quickly, and the whole thing just slips off the end of the hose and up it goes. Very quick and easy. You just need to practice your disconnect and of course reconnect. To deflate buoys, most just have very similar pull dumps to the one on your BCD. So either a shoulder dump or a kidney dump. It's just a one-way exhaust valve. There are two main colors and a bunch of random colors when it comes to SMBs. The two main colors are going to be red or yellow. Red or orange sometimes are basically the same. Manufacturers, they both aim for red. Orange is kind of the same, but it should strictly be red. But for all intents and purposes, red and orange, I'm going to say, are basically the same thing. They're the most common, and they mark a location in the water or a diver's location. They're location markers. Most divers carry a red or an orange SMB. It's the same color as our diver down flag. You've got the red and the white, so the red really does stand out in the water and it's good all-rounder. Yellow in some diving circles means an emergency, so do bear that in mind. You might get a lot of attention when you surface near a yellow SMB, but not everywhere. It's just some diving circles, they like to color code things, and if there is an emergency, they send up a yellow dSMB. And they can be harder to see if the sun is quite low on the sky because the yellow looks a lot like the sun, so there's that to bear in mind. Black SMBs have come and gone quite quickly in popularity. Black does contrast quite well, especially against bright waters and conditions, but you don't see them too much anymore, and some skippers don't actually like it if you bring black buoys. White and pink buoys, they're fine. Just remember that boat users are taught to look out for red buoys in the water, and red does stand out quite well in most conditions, so it's the choice that most divers end up with. Surface marker buoy is there to help you be seen in the water. Without one, you're just a head and shoulders sticking out of the water. And if you're wearing a black hood as well, it can be really hard to see you. And in any kind of waves, you're going to be very hard to spot. So you want the largest buoy possible to stand well above the waves and be seen by boat traffic. You do get smaller travel dSMBs that are about 90 centimeters long, but of course bear in mind that when it's actually in the water, especially when you're on your safety stop, the bottom third is probably still going to be underneath the surface. So these are best for quite calm waters. Longer 1.5 meter long buoys are better for taller waves, but they're obviously a little bit larger to pack and carry. Then you get just huge buoys that are upwards of like 3 meters long. These are for when you really want to be found in the water. Just remember that they're going to take a lot of air to fill all the way up, and it's unlikely that you're going to fill it completely at depth. And also, it's going to be quite big, so you're going to need a decent sized pocket to stow it away, or a fairly hefty D-ring to clip it off onto. dSMBs are available in two basic designs. They're either made from a single piece of material that's folded over and then stitched down one side, or two separate pieces that are sandwiched together and then stitched down both sides. The single piece design is cheaper, because it's using less materials and less stitching. They tend to be a bit skinnier as well, which makes them easier to pack, but it makes it a little bit harder to spot in poor conditions. So this is more for, again, the traveling diver. The material also wears a bit faster along that fold line and will eventually leak if you're using it again and again, so bear that in mind. Twin designs are a bit stronger long term. They're often a bit wider and they're easier to spot on the surface because they are a little bit bigger, but bigger when they're rolled up, so they're going to take up a bit more space in a pocket. Permanent buoys, you get blobs, which are just inflatable bags, and then you get rafts that have inflatable sections that are inserted into a fabric frame that can make them into something like a mini rib with storage points, attachment points, handles, and just things to allow you to rest on the surface. dSMBs should have some way to keep them from unrolling in the water. The mechanism typically consists of either a Velcro strap or a loop of bungee. The Velcro strap wraps all the way around the buoy and then sticks to itself. These are fine. They can get a little bit fiddly sometimes if you wrap it the wrong way and then you have to do it the other way, but they get the job done. Bungees are quick and easy. Just pull it over the entire thing and it just holds it all together. They can be a little bit tricky if you have chunky gloves on though, so it can be useful to have some kind of a bead or a knot, just something to grab hold of that bungee loop, and also look for a D-ring at the bottom, something to actually clip a double ender onto so that you can store it away, and then of course attach a spool or a reel when you actually want to send it up. Some dSMBs will have small see-through plastic pouches at the very top so that you can pop either a glow stick if you're diving at night so that it sticks out of the water and glows, it helps you to be seen in the dark, or if you are under the water and you can't come straight up to the surface, you need to send a message up to the surface. Whilst you're on some kind of decompression stop, you can write a message on a page of your wet notes, roll that up and then pop that in to send the message up to the surface. Surface support can then pull that out, read it, and then prepare whatever you may need before you actually surface. Gives them a few extra minutes. Another feature you may notice is reflective tape. Solus tape and similar stripes of reflective materials help to make your buoy really stand out better when a searchlight is shone in its direction. Obviously better for night dives. Just remember that day may become night if you're lost at sea for any length of time, so reflective tape is always useful. You can find some combination sets that either comprise of a dSMB with a bag to store it in, or a dSMB and a reel combination set. If they work for you, that's great, but in my experience, of course, the dSMB never goes back in the bag as neatly as when it first went in, and it's just an extra thing that's flapping around when you're already trying to control your reel, your buoy, and trying to inflate it. And reel SMB combos are quite clever to reduce the number of overall things that you need to hold on to. Just be sure that you can fit a replacement buoy in the future should something rip. Otherwise, you have this specialist reel that you can't really attach your buoy onto. And another design that you may see is a dSMB with a built-in cylinder. Good so that when you want to send up your buoy, you just open up the cylinder valve and whoosh, up it goes. But I'm not a fan of cylinders that don't require regular testing, especially ones that completely empty in the water on every dive, just because I don't know how strong they're going to be long term. The other half of a surface marker buoy is the line that it's actually attached to. So the most simple is orange floating line. Cheap buoys usually come with a good length of this loose orange line. if it's just there, it gets tangled pretty fast without a spool to control it. And a lot of divers will just measure off 6 meters of that, cut it off, and they just attach that permanently to the bottom of their spool so that when they come to do their final safety stop, it's got pretty much the correct length. Ratchet reels are good for cold water and control because it's a bit larger. You hold down some kind of lever with your thumb normally and the line pays out. You can wind the line back in and the ratchet will stop it from paying out any excess line unless you are holding down that lever. But when you come to surface, you just wind it back in. Spools are becoming a bit more popular compared to reels nowadays. They're a lot smaller, so they're easier to pack and store, and they're much more simple with no moving parts. But smaller spools can be a little bit fiddly with big clunky gloves. Similar idea, but with no moving parts. You have holes along the sides to clip a bolt snap, and that acts to stop the line from paying out so you can maintain depth, and then you can use that bolt snap to wind the line back in. Both reels and spools come in different lengths and sizes for different uses. Most divers, if you're just using a dSMB for a safety stop, then all you really need is a nice compact little 15-meter spool. For such a simple device, there's quite a lot of SMBs out there on the market. For a strong all-rounder for scuba diving, I'd look for a closed cell dSMB at least 1 meter long with stitching down both sides. That will be a good all-rounder. But try to think about the entire thing, do some shopping around and looking at all of the features so that you make sure that you get the right buoy for you. For more gear buying guides and other scuba diving know-how, stick around and of course subscribe to the Scuba Diving Magazine channel by clicking on the button underneath this video, and check out our website scubadivingmag.com where we upload the latest scuba diving news as well as articles. And if you're interested in buying an SMB, then check out one of our affiliate dive stores by clicking on the link up here. Thank you for watching everybody, and of course, safe diving.